Well, welcome to another episode of the CK Press podcast, what we're now calling Fireside Chats. We had 3 episodes with former pastor of this church, John Haberlin, and I am now extremely grateful and excited to welcome and have a conversation with our other former pastor, Jim Davis. So thanks for being with us and chatting with us.
Oh, you're welcome, Ty.
Yeah. Well, the first question I asked John, and I'm going to ask you as well, is just what is your favorite book? Doesn't have to be a theology book.
Nonfiction or fiction?
Would that help you narrow it down? Let's do a fiction book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Favorite fiction book would probably be either Narnia Chronicles or Lord of the Rings.
Okay.
And nonfiction, it would have to be a biography of something that I could
Okay.
go. Really, the person I've enjoyed the most recently has been David McCullough, who just passed away recently. And he's done a number of biographies as well as things on American history. And I really appreciate his style and his commitment to research and all kinds of things. I read a book called The Bridge.
Okay.
And it's about the building of the Brooklyn Bridge. And it goes into all kinds of technical detail, and he explains in the introduction how he didn't know anything about any of this, and how in order to write about it knowledgeably, he had to research and he had to talk to people who did, and he had to become kind of much more knowledgeable about this area than he was before he ever started writing it, and how it was really a great journey for him.
Yeah.
And he actually went up to the library in upstate New York, where the builder of the bridge had all his papers had been enshrined.
Oh, yeah.
And he walked into the library. It was a Saturday. There was a football game going on. It was fall. And he asked the librarian, where are the papers of this person? And the librarian said, oh, they're up on the 3rd floor. And he said, can I go up and see them? And she said, nobody here because of the football game except for me. And he said, can I get the key? And she said, I suppose. So he trudges up the 3 flights of stairs with his wife, and he goes into a room that he expects to be kind of organized, and it just is all thrown in, like somebody was in the process of moving in. They hadn't unpacked any boxes at all, and so here he is. He says, taking the papers and the diaries of this guy who built the Brooklyn Bridge for the first time, and organizing them all.
Oh,
and
wow.
It's like King Tut's tomb, for the building the Brooklyn Bridge, and he just writes about it in that way, in fascinating ways. And I've always been fascinated by history, so I think it has to do with history. But then, if you go beyond the categories of fiction and nonfiction, you have to go to the Bible, right?
Yep. Yeah. Is there as a Lord of the Rings fan, have you watched the new series?
Yeah.
Do you like it, or what do you think about that, the new series?
I don't have the problems that some people have with it.
Okay.
And the reason is because I think that they're trying to make it into a tight prequel.
Yeah.
And it's not meant to be that.
Right. Yeah.
You're talking about a completely different story and a completely different generation, but in the same location.
Yeah.
And with the same kind of forces at play in the story. And I think it's brilliant the way it's been filmed and staged and everything else. Haven't had enough to really see what they're going to do with the characters yet.
Yeah.
So, and in terms of the diversity of characters, that doesn't bother me at all.
No. Did you have a favorite of the trilogy of the Lord of the Rings book? Is it?
It'd probably be the first one.
The first one. Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. I was always Harry Potter for me came first.
Yeah.
Before any Tolkien stuff.
Yeah.
And so it's really hard for me to pull myself outside of the kind of paradigm of what Harry Potter was like and get into. But I enjoyed reading those books when I was younger. But I've really enjoyed this new series because I feel like it's a little different than the movies, and but it makes me want to read more Tolkien. Yeah. Even though he didn't write anything what's happening here, it makes me want to read more of his books.
Yeah. Those inklings, Williams and Tolkien, and Carolyn's in a book club with Becky Bettridge, Joe's wife, and it's called Renovari, and it's a book club centered on spiritual development and growth. And they read all kinds of stuff. Last year they read a biography of Eugene Peterson.
Oh, yeah.
And this year they're going to read a biography of, what's the gal's name in American history? Sojourner Truth.
Okay.
And I know nothing about Sojourner Truth,
Yeah.
so I'm interested in seeing what she's going to find out.
Yeah. All right. So across the same lines of favorite book, what is your favorite theology book, or the book maybe that had the biggest impact on your theological? I don't know what
Development. Yeah.
Development. Yeah.
This is easy.
Okay.
Yeah. And will become easy for you
Yes.
soon.
Okay.
It's called the Greek New Testament.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Greek opens up a whole different world. And it's not that I shouldn't have said different probably. What I should have said is in addition to.
Yeah.
A whole different depth would have been a better way to put it. Because there's absolutely nothing wrong with English translations, but if you've ever taken a foreign language, any other foreign language, did you ever take a foreign language?
Yeah, I took Spanish.
Okay, you took Spanish.
Yeah.
Okay, well you know that as you translate from Spanish to English,
Yep.
you do a good job.
Yeah.
And there's some translations that are better than others. But
Right.
no translation can ever capture all the nuance that's in the original. And that's the fun of it.
Yeah.
And they've made it so easy now compared to when we were going through.
Yeah.
And with all the computer tools that you've got at your disposal.
Yeah.
So I taught a course toward the end of my time with Fuller, and it was really intended for pastors who were doing DMINs.
Okay.
And it was called Greek Tools for Pastoral Ministry. And what I taught them how to do was, the software will analyze so many things for you that we had to analyze from our memory. You don't have to do that anymore.
Right.
So what do? You spend time thinking about what those categories really mean. Okay, it's you put a label on this, and now that you've labeled it, what does that mean in this context? And when you begin to do that, everything opens up for you. And people really get excited about it. So yeah.
Would you recommend? I know you probably would recommend that all pastors take Greek as far as they can, right?
Yeah,
Continue to grow.
I don't know if that's a requirement in the Reformed Baptist Church, but it certainly was in the Presbyterian Church up until recently.
Yeah.
And now everything's kind of changing around in terms of being able to use software and things like that.
Right.
But, yeah.
Would you say that? Would you say that it'd be important for the average layperson?
Yeah, and it's becoming increasingly accessible to the average layperson. Gosh, I could give you, if we were sitting down and looking at this, I could give you 7 or 8 ways that you could begin to look at it right now.
Yeah.
The only thing you need to do is to be able to recognize the alphabet.
Yep.
And I always used to start off Greek classes by saying, hey, this is going to be a lot easier because there are not as many letters in the Greek alphabet as there are in the English letter for a start. And you already know 2 of them. You know Alpha and Omega.
Right.
So, we used to sing the alphabet song. And you can actually sing to Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. You can sing the Greek alphabet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's how Bill Mounts teaches it in his little class online.
Yeah.
I remember that. I don't know if I remember the song.
Yeah.
I mean,
It goes, you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Alpha, beta, gamma, delta, epsilon, 2, zeta, eta, theta, and iota, kappa, lambda, mu, nu, xi, omicron, pi, rho, sigma, tau, upsilon, phi, chi, psi, and omega 2. That's the Greek alphabet for you. At least in Jim Davis's version.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah.
Now everybody has it.
Everybody's got it. And once you know the alphabet, then you can use all the tools.
Right. Yeah.
But you can't pause to say, now what's that letter again?
Yeah.
So when I taught Greek, I would always say your goal in the first week is just to memorize 24 letters.
Yeah.
That's all you got to do, 24 letters.
Yeah.
And you already know a lot of them because they're the same kind of letters as you find in English.
Right.
For example, beta is a B and
Yeah.
gamma is a G. And there really, I think, are only about 5 that don't have English cognates.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and a lot of people know them because of the Greek system in college.
Right, and then Bible Gateway, which is a site that a lot of people use for Bible study, a lot of lay people use.
Yeah.
They now have an interlinear version. And interlinear means English and Greek below each other, above each other. And once you know that, you can look down, you can see what the Greek word is, you can click on it, and it'll take you to a standard lexicon. It'll show you the meanings that it has across the literature that comes from the same time as the New Testament.
Yeah.
When the New Testament was written, and you're off. You're running. Yep.
Yeah, I've enjoyed starting to slowly learn Greek on my own because I'm a Spanish, or I have a Spanish background in school. I have a really tough time of trying to get rid of the Spanish accent when I say Greek words, because some of them look the same or seem like they should have a little bit of an accent, but it's not Spanish. So.
Well, nobody really knows how you pronounce Koine
That's
Greek,
true,
so you're
right?
okay.
I'm all right. Okay, I'll just I'll sound a little different up if I say anything like that. All right. Well, I just love hearing people's stories, whether they were specifically their testimonies about becoming a Christian, whether it was they always grew up in a Christian home and kind of maybe hear a little bit about what that was like for them, or if they have a day and a moment that they can recall, because not everybody does, but I would love to hear a little bit about your experience becoming a Christian, if you...
Sure. This may take up most of the time today.
All right.
Because blessedly, God's been in my life for a long, long time in a lot of ways. And so, I can remember being not a 6'8" guy, but a little guy that probably wasn't as tall as this fireplace.
Okay.
And being in First Presbyterian Church in Akron, Ohio with my mother and father, and looking, and my view was of the cover of the hymnal, and I couldn't see over the top.
Okay.
And Dad would have to pull me up next to him on the pew so I could see what was really going on. And then, just a number of things out of there, memorizing the 23rd Psalm, and getting a star for that, singing in the choir. They had a children's choir. And we had to drive to church about 25 minutes in the morning on Sunday, or 25 minutes for a midweek program on Wednesday. And so those are the earliest parts of my spiritual journey, along with the fact that both my father and mother were Christians, and so I was raised in a Christian home. Dad would come home from work. He worked about an hour away by that time, and he was a sales manager for industrial gases and welding equipment, a regional sales manager. Worked in Cleveland, and I grew up in Cuyahoga Falls, which is just north of Akron, so about an hour south.
Okay.
Dad would come home. He'd get home, kind of about the time I would be going to bed, between 7 and 8 o'clock, my brother and I. And he would always make it a point to come and sit on the edge of the bed, and he would say prayers with us, and then he would sing to us one verse of the Old Rugged Cross.
Oh.
And so that's earliest memories of my father. And really over all these years of pastoral ministry, and something you've probably already discovered, but you'll continue to discover, is how much a person's perception, any person's perception of God, is colored for better or for worse, and for anywhere in between. It's colored by their experience of their human father.
Yeah. And
God has chosen this title for himself, knowing that. And knowing that all the good that we derive from our fathers is preparing us for the ultimate good, the total good, the completely good of a Heavenly Father. And if you've had a wonderful father, as I have, you're already looking forward to the rest of whatever that is, because
Right.
you had a great parent. So then let's fast forward. And I'm in a sophomore now in high school, and we've stopped attending First Presbyterian Church of Akron,
Okay.
and started attending the United Presbyterian Church. At that time, they were different denominations in Cuyahoga Falls. I'm a sophomore. I'm playing basketball, and I get involved with a group called the Fellowship of Christian Athletes.
Yep.
And they have a summer camp, and the linebacker from the Baltimore Colts is the principal speaker, and he really brought the gospel home in a way that I understood it, and the Bible that I still have and still carry and I've used all my life comes from that FCA camp, and it's not covered in the same cover it used to have. And it's got a lot of underlining in it now.
Yeah.
And stuff written in the margins, but that's where that came from. So that's another waypoint along the way.
Yeah.
And then I'm going on from that. I'm in college now. I'm in freshman year. There's a Christian fellowship group that comes out of Pennsylvania and R.C. Sproul circles. And Tom Phillips is there, and he's the person who kind of leads this group, and Tom eventually became an Episcopal priest and was for many years. Anyway, he sat me down one time and he said, "Jim," he said, "you obviously know a lot about God, and I've heard you tell the story of how God kind of became even more real for you because of your experience through FCA." And he said, "But it still feels to me like sometimes you know about him, but you don't really know him." And so he's the person that actually offered me the opportunity to invite Jesus to come into my life. So all of that, like Paul says, when he talks about his Damascus road, when God was pleased to reveal himself to me. And he means by that in a personal way. Paul knew, he knew about everything you could know about God.
Yeah.
He says in Philippians, he advanced beyond many of his own generation in terms of his knowledge of God, the knowledge that he derived from Torah and everything else. But when God was pleased to reveal his Son in me, and that's probably the minute when that happened. And then, we can go on from there and talk about other things, but that's really, I think, what you were asking.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good.
Yeah.
What, from there, how when did you start to feel like pastoral ministry or ministry in general was on your horizon, or did you start to feel that internal call to that?
Yeah, interestingly, it came, so I'm in my freshman year in college when that happened, that I described to you before.
Yeah.
And I'm still in my freshman year of college, and I went to college to become an architect.
Okay.
I love architecture, I still do. But there was this thing called calculus that just didn't agree with my system. It just upset my whole apple cart. And so I'm in the midst of that, and then in the College of Worcester, which at that time was historically connected to the Presbyterian Church, still is connected in history, but not very much in culture. A fella came from National Presbyterian Church, Louis Evans Jr., and his father had been a famous pastor in Los Angeles, and Louis Evans Jr. was pastoring National Presbyterian Church in Washington, D.C. He came to be a speaker on campus.
Okay.
And at the end of his talk, he just said, I'm around here for this afternoon and tomorrow afternoon, and I'm just going to leave my schedule open. And if you want to schedule some time with me, we can take a walk around, campus or whatever, and I'd be glad to do that. So I come through my conversation with Tom Phillips, and this happens, probably within a couple of weeks after that. And I said, it'd be great to go and, kind of tell him what's happened. And in the midst of that conversation, after he had talked to me for a while and knew who I was and knew where I came from and knew my experiences and background, he said, you really ought to think about ministry. And that's where my journey into ministry began. And it's moved on from there. And when I graduated from college, I wasn't sure that it was God's call for me. So I decided to test it out. And I went to become a youth minister, a youth pastor, and lead a youth group at Southminster Presbyterian Church, which is in Centerville, Ohio, just south of Dayton, Ohio.
Okay.
Led a mission trip with a bunch of kids to Twin Wells Indian Reservation in Arizona on a mission trip. 25 kids maybe in a bus for 5 days.
Yeah.
Driving out there, 5 days there, and 5 days coming back.
My goodness.
I can still remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was one of my youth ministry experiences.
Wow.
And that turned out to be affirming, both internally and externally in terms of what people said. And so I went on from there to seminary and then on out.
And did you study at Fuller? Was that where you got your seminary degree?
No, I went to Trinity in Chicago.
Okay.
Yep. There were 3 seminaries at that time, still are, that were the major evangelical seminaries in America.
Okay.
Those would be Gordon Conwell and Trinity and Fuller.
Yeah.
And Dallas certainly is as large as any of those, but it has its own dispensational kind of slant,
Yeah.
which is certainly evangelical, but it's an addition to what you call classic evangelicalism. And those three were at the time I went, larger than any Presbyterian seminary, except for Princeton.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So there were a bunch of Presbyterians at Trinity in Chicago, and it was a great place to be. Had a great experience there. And,
Yeah.
that pushed me on into PhD work and then beyond.
And maybe it'd be nice to get a quick expose of what your career's looked like since seminary. So you did the youth ministry gig, seminary.
Yeah, all my internships were in youth ministry during seminary.
Okay.
And I'm actually teaching a class. We started another class for Flourish Institute of Theology, which is the new theological school that ECO is beginning.
Okay.
And I was doing a Zoom class, and there was a young woman on there from Phoenix, Scottsdale, Arizona. And she is a graduate of Northwestern and plays the organ, studied music and organ and vocal stuff there.
Huh.
And they got a great school of music. And I connected with her right away because I said one of my youth ministry stints was in First Presbyterian Church in Evanston.
Okay.
And their organist was a gal from Northwestern. And that was a great youth ministry stint. And I did one in Lake Forest, Illinois, and you usually do one in each of your last 2 years of seminary.
Okay.
At least when I went through it. I don't know what they're doing now.
Yeah.
So those are my 2 youth ministry experiences.
Yeah.
And then I come through seminary, and by that time my professors have said to me, kind of like Louis Evans said to me about seminary, they've said, you should really consider doctoral studies, because I'd been a teaching assistant for a number of people in the New Testament department. And so they said, you should consider this. So from there on to do PhD work for 3 years, 2 years in Nottingham, finished up a year at Cambridge, wrote a thesis on 1 Corinthians 1 through 3 called Wisdom and Spirit, talking about the way those two things need to intersect in our lives as we grow toward maturity in Christ. And finished the PhD, came back, and Jim Lewis from our congregation and I share this in common. Jim was born and raised in Bowling Green, Kentucky, where Western Kentucky University has a Department of Philosophy and Religion.
Okay.
And when I finished my PhD, a man by the name of Bill Lane had come over to Cambridge, where I was researching, and we had gotten to be friends, and he was on the faculty there, and they needed a faculty replacement for a sabbatical that somebody was taking. So I went there for a year, and then I went up to Pittsburgh and taught in an Episcopal seminary, and I'm working part-time in the church and teaching full-time. And then after 7 years of doing that, I swapped the proportions of my life around and began to pastor full-time and teach part-time.
Okay.
And I've always done both.
Yeah.
And it's really enriched both. And so what I say at the start of the class is that I really call myself, you can call me a teaching pastor or a pastoral teacher, one or the other. But that's the way people experience me. In the academy, I'm a pastor who teaches and brings that perspective. And in the church, I'm a pastor who teaches and kind of brings that perspective to my pastoring. So that's where I've been. So on from there to Mercer Island, I was an associate pastor.
Okay.
And then a senior pastor in California, in Piedmont, in the East Oakland Hills, in the San Francisco Bay Area. And then on from that back here to CK from 99 to 07. And then my last position for 12 years was pastoring one of the 4 large churches in the Houston metro area, the one up north, called Kingwood, which is up by the airport. And I retired in 2019. And we knew where we wanted to come back. And we came right back up here.
Yeah.
Yeah, to Silverdale.
Is
Love
it,
the Northwest.
Yeah.
All the beauty and none of the traffic over here as compared to Seattle.
Yes.
So, yeah. And we love being back here.
Yeah. How would you describe the difference between the way the church looks, not CK Press per se, but just the church universally, or in the West specifically, looks today versus it looked maybe when you were first kind of starting to your pastoral.
Yeah, I think the first thing that comes to mind is diversity.
Yeah.
The church in America is a much more diverse place,
Hmm.
and we understand our place within the world differently
Yeah.
than we did when I was growing up, for sure, because we were still sending missionaries. And that's not a bad thing to continue to do, but
Yeah.
it was with the mindset that they need us.
Hmm.
And now the mindset is almost we need them,
Yeah.
and that's a really good thing. And I think that's partly the result of the fact that mission became in my lifetime something that the whole church would be involved in. The mission trips that we do to different places gives us a perspective of how valuable their experience of Christ is,
Right.
alongside ours.
Yeah.
And so I'd say that's one of the principal differences in the church. There are all kinds of differences. The culture of the church is different, and the way in which people look at the history of the church is different,
Yeah.
and how that impacts the culture of the church. All kinds of things.
Yeah.
We were just talking about Greek. Everybody used to be required to do Greek, and
Right.
now that's different. And
Yeah.
so I could go on with this one for a long time, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Is there a challenge that you faced in ministry that maybe taught you something new about, or reminded you about a truth about God, or something new about God, or just how to relate to people? Like there was something that really stuck with you from that challenge.
Well, you've taken it in a completely different direction.
I
We're
have.
going down one stream, and you've just changed
I know,
to a
I'm
different
sorry.
point. Let me grab a
That's how
different.
my brain works.
Let me grab a different canoe and a different paddle.
Okay.
All right. So a challenge,
Yeah.
and within the church. A challenge that I grappled with here and then again in Kingwood, and that led me from one part of the Presbyterian family to another part of the Presbyterian family, was the challenge of how to deal with the changing cultural values surrounding same-sex relationships, and particularly same-sex marriage. And it forced me to clarify both what I thought Scripture said and my attitude towards that, and my attitude towards people who would identify as same-sex. And both of those challenges were good for me. And that would be one of the biggest ones, I think.
Yeah. Thanks for watching. To stay up to date with the podcast and for more content, hit subscribe, and then also hit that notification bell to be notified when we have more episodes drop. Thanks.